And Manfredi, I want to start with you. I want to start with defining social value, and I think it's so important because we have three separate organizations and industries represented. So I would love to hear from you. How does your organization define social value as well as delivering on it?
So let me start from numbers. The world population lives in cities for almost 60%. And in the few years, by 2030, another 500 million of people will move into cities. And by 2050, if you take the latest figures of United Nations, 70% of the world population will live in cities. So the point is the cities are very much where social relationship consume, and where also the affordability issues, all the community issues happens. So the work we do as a company is actually developing cities, developing neighborhoods. And just to respond to your questions about how do we do it, that it's easy in a way to say given what we do because we build it. I can take as an example the neighborhood that we developed in joint venture with QIA in Milan, which has become one of the best-in-class neighborhoods worldwide. It has been the first neighborhood to be certified LEED and Welfare Community. And maybe perhaps someone of you might have heard about it because of certain buildings. There is the vertical forest, which ultimately became a symbol of sustainability. So in a way, when you develop a cities, you develop something that will stay for generation, and ultimately cities account for 70% of environmental problems, so consumptions and emissions of energy. So in many ways, our DNA is social by birth, because we have to have to act responsibly when we develop, think to what is the impact that we do, which is what we actually perform in all our development. Let me pause here so that you can continue, and then we can maybe elaborate on.
Definitely. Tomaso?
For us, and maybe I explain our company is Talabat. I see a lot of people not from the region probably, so Talabat is a food delivery company. We do food delivery and grocery deliveries. And I think for us is really at the core of our business and its operations. So we work with 100,000 riders in the region. We operate in 8 countries. And I think at the end of the day, it's a way for these people to sustain their families, right? So our monthly payroll to the riders is $70 million, and 20 million out of these 70 million go in remittances back to their families in their home countries, right? So I think I come from Italy as well, like Manfredi, and I'm from a very small town. My town is like 200,000 people. It's called Padova. And I think today Talabat can easily say to sustain 300 or 400,000 people, which is something to be extremely proud of, I think, and makes me very proud about our company.
Mm-hmm. Margarita, let's hear from you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shartia. So I work at a climate tech fund called 2150. So we're a venture capital fund investing into early stage technologies that are focused on, similarly to COIMA, making cities more sustainable and resilient. And so we see, I think, the lever of cities in a similar way. It's where most of the people globally live. It's where a lot of emissions come from. But it's also where we can also have a very positive impact, I think, on social aspects of society. And so thematically, whilst climate and sustainability and decarbonization are at the core of what we do, we think very carefully about the social impact of that, both positively and negatively. So I think within a kind of, from a kind of thesis perspective, definition perspective, we talk a lot about well-being. So yes, we're investing into technology, but one of the great things about technology is that it has an impact on people and human lives. So that's something that we try to quantify as part of our impact framework, specifically around the kind of well-being aspects of society. And then the other thing I would say is one of the things we're thinking about is there's a lot of positives that come out of a transition to a cleaner economy, and I think a lot of those positives are reflected in society at large, particularly because of the fact that climate change is fungible, so something that happens in one part of the world is felt in a different part of the world, and often there's an embedded inequality in that. But there's also, huge amount of employment in traditionally kind of bad industries, oil and gas, for example. Regions of the world that are being deforested, actually they're deforested, and that provides a lot of employment. So we really try to take quite a systematic view on these topics, and ideally, when we invest, do that in a thoughtful way so that we're being responsible in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And so we're on a journey, right, to get to where we need to be. And with that, Tomaso, you mentioned 8 countries, 100,000 employees. Talabat is celebrating 20 years of being in business, I believe,
year, yes.
and is now the largest online food ordering company in the Middle East, if I'm correct. So where are you on your journey of delivering social value?
So, look, it's something we deeply care about, I think, as a company, and it comes in all aspects. One is for sure the riders, and making sure they make a very good living out of it, right? And that's very important. But also come to caring for what the people in the Middle East care about, right? And I think we like to use our platform for what we call Tech for Good, and we facilitated donations of meals. People have been donating more than 6 million meals through the Talabat app, and donations to charities and World Food Program and things like that. More than $14 million were donated. But at the end of the day, is also improving the working conditions of our riders and our stakeholders. To give you an example, I do quarterly deliveries myself. I get on a motorbike and I do, and we have I get always a lot of learnings from that, right? One example was last time I did it in summer. It was very hot, and I put my phone on the phone holder of the bike to see where to go, where to deliver the food, etc. And the phone died immediately for the heat, right? And it's like, what do I do now, right? And I thought, like, all the riders must be keeping their phone in their pocket to avoid this happening, right? And it's very unsafe for them, like, to go around and pick it out of the pocket, etc. So then we installed UV shields in all the bikes now, so that the sun doesn't go through and the phones are alive. So these little things, and we think about all these little improvements. In the last 2 years, we reduced accident rate of our riders by 79% on the road. So I think also that's part of, if you want to call it social responsibility, I think we as a company need to take action on that.
Mm-hmm. I just want to follow. I'm curious because your organization was acquired by Delivery Hero in 2016. So how did you mesh your social value impact and activities with your now parent company? Was it very synergistic, or did you encounter some challenges in the beginning, or was it just complete alignment?
I think sometimes, big companies have big plans, and that's I think what usually happens. And the bigger the plan, the further probably deviates from the core values or the core business of the company, right? And so we tried a lot of things at the beginning, like sustainable packaging and things like that, and we had a lot of learnings, a lot of mistakes, etc. What we realized ultimately is that what works is to find really local, impactful initiatives that you can drive that are really close to your business, right? And if there's no synergy between a social impact activity that you do and your business, the CEO will not care that much about it because it doesn't drive any business result, and it will not focus the organization enough on it. To give you an example, we are very excited now about the EV drive, right? I think EV It's probably going to be a big revolution in the food delivery space. There's a lot of demand for electric cars, but also electric bikes, and we think in the future this will drive a greener, sustainable world. For us, it's interesting also on the business side because the maintenance and the cost of running an EV fleet is much lower probably than a petrol fleet, right? And this is an example where you have the business objective and the environment objective that are very aligned, right? And this is something I am really driving myself.
Thank you for that. Manfredi, I want to come back to you because I know recently one of your funds have exceeded $1 billion recently, and want if you could expand on the project that you're working on for the 2026 Winter Games with Prada, and how you're delivering social value there.
Yeah, this is a fund that we raised for Italy from Italian investors in this case, but has a lot of rooted on what we did in Portanova with QAA, with the legacy that we developed together. This is the first fund that has been created in the country with an impact approach. And the impact approach, the way we define it is relatively simple, is we set not just financial performance, but social and environmental at the beginning of each investment. And then we monitor the implementation of the performance through the process of developing and at the end. And obviously, we report with transparent data. As part of this fund, we are developing the Winter Olympics, as you were remembering. Maybe a few words just to contextualize. Milan won the Winter Olympics for 2026, and as part of the infrastructure of the event, there is the Athlete Village. The Athlete Village has a very tight schedule because need to be delivered by us to the government by July 2025. So it's less than 2 years for the whole development of this infrastructure. And what is interesting about this is that, as we all know, these temporary events very often are a waste because there are a lot of capital invested for something that is temporary. And despite there is a lot of declaration about reuse and so on, but fundamentally there is a big waste on resources and so on. This is a case where hopefully we will prove the contrary because the infrastructure has been designed already with a permanent use, which is going to be an affordable student housing. It's going to be the largest affordable housing in Italy. And actually we are developing it, delivering it for the temporary use, but immediately after, hopefully within the academic year of 2026-2027, will be immediately open to students. And this will be like obviously a very nice transition and also socially sustainable and environmentally sustainable.
Thank you. Margarita, I saw you nodding your head there when Manfredi was talking.
Yeah, I mean, part of that was from personal experience. I'm Greek originally, despite my accent, and there was a lot of wastage after the 2004 Olympics in Greece. So I think it's part of it was in recognition that that's indeed a problem. So it's good to hear that you're thinking about that up front. But I think kind of maybe to stay on this topic of the built environment, because for us that's also a big focus. I do think, when you try and take everything into account, like environmentally speaking, buildings are actually one of the worst things for society, right? From the materials that we put in to build these buildings up to the operational kind of carbon involved in it. And then, on the flip side, this is where we spend most of our time, right, as people internally. And so I do think, again, there's a lot of opportunity to do these things right. And I can kind of share some examples if that's helpful. So within our focus, can I get a slightly different question? Sorry.
Oh, definitely.
Apologies, I'm a bit baffled.
No worries.
3 a.m. flight.
No, I just want, if you can expand a little bit more about 2150, because I know you invest in early stage companies, and just want to talk with you, how do you, I know your firm is on the search for gigacorns, if I'm not mistaken, and so how do you establish criteria when you're determining which companies you invest in and add to your portfolio?
Yeah, so I think that the starting point is that we also look for financial returns as well as social returns and environmental returns. So as Manfredi mentioned for COIMA, so we're an Article 9 fund, which per kind of European legislation means that we need to formally report on that positive impact. But we're trying to achieve that whilst also achieving traditional returns for a venture capital fund. The way we think about that is we have a kind of framework that looks across 4 pillars. So decarbonization is one, and the impact on emissions. Social purpose is a second one, which we've talked about. Resources, efficiency is a third one. And then really that human experience layer, so well-being is a really kind of key focus for us. The way that comes to life in our portfolio is that as part of any assessment of a company, we try to pre-qualify effectively the performance of a company across the key metric. And this will vary, and the approach is very tailored because we invest at different stages, companies that are kind of everything from sort of green cement and concrete through to climate fintech solutions. So we try and take a very tailored approach. And I think a key part of how we try to also add value as an investor is sort of post-investment, really working with the companies to continue to tell that story. I think that's a really important thing. 10 years ago, I don't think we could be here having this conversation about kind of returns as well as purpose. I think the market's really evolved, and I think this is a story that also investors want to hear. It creates a lot of opportunity for these companies. So that's something that we're very focused on, is the storytelling aspect. And I think when we're talking about social value, social purpose, fundamentally we're talking about people and about humans. So I think there's a lot of value in that particular aspect as well.
Definitely. And I want to add on that and bring you in, Tomaso, the whole notion of focusing on the ecosystem. I know that's one of your words. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I think for any marketplace business like we are absolutely nothing without our partners and our stakeholders, right? So we are a tech company. We operate in the middle of what is a restaurant or a grocery store and our customers, and we have our riders as partners to kind of deliver a service, right? And the only way to survive is if every single player of the ecosystem is happy, right? And if they benefit from the whole system, right? And over the years, we've been expanding and growing our business through ecosystem initiatives, right? Through adding on top of like our food delivery business, our grocery business, some fintech solutions, right? For example, we have this now buy now, pay later product for our customers, a subscription product for our customers, but also other initiatives that could help our ecosystem thrive. For example, now we're looking into vendor financing. And I think that's something where we believe we can accelerate the development of restaurants in the Middle East, right? Because a lot of restaurants face working capital constraints, working capital issues, etc. As long as other fintech solutions for the riders, right? So at the end of the day, we are part of a community in where we operate, and the community needs to benefit from our operations and our business. Otherwise, we have no business.
Oh, definitely. Manfredi, I want to bring you in and talk about the role of measurement and governance. So at COIMA, how are you measuring social value and holding yourself accountable as well?
First, a comment that goes exactly in the opposite direction. Of course, we are strong believers of quantitative performance. Because there is nothing that you can say perform unless you can measure it. So it's very important to define key performance indicator, establish target, deadlines, report it transparently. And we're doing this very responsibly in any ways and form. But the comments that I was about making is that sustainability, I think the fundamental reflection on sustainability is that the world is flattening in a way, aligning for compliance. And for compliance reason and for reporting reasons, you act as an organization in an almost administrative way. Sustainability, in my mind, is first about culture, it's about values, which was your initial question. And you act well as a father, as a mother, as a person, not because you have the civil code or because you have to report in a certain way. It's because you believe in a certain behavior profoundly. And this is, I think, is a big gap of our society today, which is less about numbers and more about values. Probably because we are in an historical period, particularly on the Western economies, where families and religion are less relevant in the society compared to the past. So which in the past were kind of a little bit the custodian of values. And I think there is a gap here, which is cultural. Having said this, of course we have to measure it. Of course we are reporting. We do, this is like bread and butter in a way of our ordinary working life. Our funds have been certified global sector leader from GRESB. 90% of our portfolio is certified LEED. So we do have obviously all the deep data. And but I would say probably what we have done, which we think is more interesting in learning, is what I said before, meaning becoming disciplined in establishing quantitative target at the very beginning of an investment, and then keep highlighting the performance progressively, so that you can show the deviation, what you have not done, which is also important. Like mistakes are not bad, no, as far as you recognize that you have a mistake and you react accordingly. So in a way, I see measurement more as an evolutionary disciplined way to do to act correctly in a responsive way, rather than be the reason why we do it.
Mm-hmm. Can I quickly come in here, because I think I agree very much with this. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. The problem with specific KPIs is that it becomes quite easy to manipulate the KPI, and so I think becoming fixated on a particular number or particular thing, it can actually be sometimes counterproductive. And I think the panel just before us was talking a little bit about that, and in the context of kind of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and those are kind of, that's one of the metrics that companies are really using in the context of ESG now, and there's a lot of kind of gray areas, and so I really wanted to kind of agree with that point around culture, values. It's something that we assess. I mean, we're in the business of investing into companies, but really we invest into people, because we invest at the earliest stage, and then we aim to stay with those companies on that journey as they scale. So I think the kind of courageous leadership and ability to kind of, again, tell that story and create, I think, a culture and a value that resonates is important. I think the other thing I wanted to mention is also just the importance of partnership and sort of collaboration. So I've been investing into technology for the last 6 years. I came from a more traditional banking background. And I think the level of collaboration that you see in the sort of sustainable investing space is so much higher, and it's still competitive on occasion, but there's a real value in bringing people together. And I wanted to give actually a shout out here, because we've partnered at our top co, which is called Urban Partners, with Bloomberg New Energy Forum to set up this Dynamic Cities Coalition. And there it's really about kind of key organizations coming together, taking that step, showing that it can be done. You can achieve the sort of social value and purpose as well as the profits. And what we see is that others then follow. But I do think you really need to kind of tell that story and not focus too much just on the KPIs and ticking the box.
Let me just support what Margarita say with an example. Now, many people brought me our sustainability report the other day, the draft. So as a CEO, I read the draft, no? And I see the figures. No? So I'm just complementing what Margarita was saying about numbers. And like many companies, now we have 50% men, 50% women, and we should be proud of this. And to be honest with you, I said, guys, I don't care about the 50-50-50. I want to have 100% of my people that are not preclusive, no matter of the sex or the colors or the language or whatever, because you want to be open-minded. You want to have a company, an organization, which doesn't really think on the difference, because if you say the 50-50, of course there is a reason, we all know the reasons, but it's not really what you want. It's not that you want 50-50. You want to have 100% of people the reasons in a very open mind without having preconceived opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we're out of time, but I always like to ask if you have a call to action for our esteemed audience. And I'll start with you, Tomaso. What is one tip you would like to share with our audience as they, are on their journey of delivering social value? What is one thing they should keep in mind?
I think really do something that is close to your business. I think buying credits, etc. I don't think is something really valuable for a company. What's much more valuable is like what can you do in your own ecosystem to improve the communities and the society. We're all in. I think that's important. And if I can give a second thing, if you order on Talabat, always tip the riders.
Appreciate that. Margarita?
Yes, I definitely agree on kind of find something that's core to your business. And I think another piece of advice, particularly if there's people in businesses where this is not a kind of core focus, is try and find something that is sustainable in the sense that it has a positive benefit but is also good for business. And I think you gave a great example, Tomas. In most businesses, there are similar examples. Energy transition, it can be framed in a lot of different ways. Energy security is one of the ways that we're kind of seeing it framed a lot. So try and find what is that business hook, because that's what's probably going to make it more sustainable, more resilient, and is going to resonate with the greater audience. So it's not just about doing good, it's actually about making money, because fortunately or unfortunately, it is the society that we live in, but you can actually achieve both, and it can be very powerful if you do.